So now is time for our program. So Tom, if you'll come give a little introduction to our program, and then once introductions are done, give him a big giant Greeley Centennial Rotary welcome. All yours, and we will have a microphone for questions afterwards, and this is working.
Thank you. And it's always a pleasure to introduce our mayor. But I'm always at a loss of words because I know John for so long and worked with him so much that if I got into the stories, it would ruin his entire presentation. And so I don't want to, give away too much. But John has been the mayor for 6 years now almost, and it's a job that you have to run for office every 2 years, which is kind of strange, but it keeps you on your toes and makes you represent the public better. But today I'm introducing him as the #1 safety officer for School District 6, and talk about. I was talking to him about what are the challenges that he has and what are the challenges that the district has. We hear a lot of big stories on the news and shootings and all kinds of stuff. So I was interested in, and John was willing to come and give a presentation as the chief safety officer for School District 6 about how they plan, handle, and manage that program for the district. So John, without more noise, it is all yours.
Thank you.
Yep.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be with you. I get a lot of presentation requests, and when I get them, I put in parentheses on my calendar, school security or mayor, and I didn't do that this time. And Tom set it up a while back. I thought Tom was still out of state, so I texted Stacy a couple of days ago and said, am I speaking about mayor stuff or school security? And so it's school security. I'm glad to be with you. Would you say that school security has evolved over the last number of years? When most of us in this room, there's a few youngsters, were going through school, what would you have thought about having either security officers in the school, somebody that just oversees security in schools, law enforcement in schools? It would have been unheard of, but our society's changed. Sadly, I am busier in school security than I ever was in law enforcement. I know most of you, but I'm born and raised in Greeley, went through Greeley schools. For those that not Greeley schools, I think I turned out okay, as did many of you in this room. Spent just over 25 years with the Greeley Police Department, was not looking to leave, and I was recruited for a job as Director of Safety and Security at District 6. I took it because my wife said, you're only 46 years old and you've been a cop over 25 years, and maybe it's time to have a second career. And she was right. She usually is. So I took the job, and I'm in my 20th year, and I have an exit strategy. It's going to be soon. But I woke up about 3 months ago to age 65, and I asked myself, you're 65 years old and you basically have 2 full-time jobs. What in the hell are you doing? So while I love coming to work every day, I love both capacities. Once in a while, when I'm having a particularly hectic day as mayor, I think of you, Tom, and the beloved Mike Guile, rest in peace, Mike, for convincing me to go down this road. But thank you also for being my political mentor. Every day I use something I learned from you, and got a decision to make here soon about whether to run for my final term as mayor or right into the sunset. So in any event, I think I told you, I spent just over 25 years with police, and I'm in my 20th year at school district, and I really loved every minute of it. But it's pretty hectic keeping our schools safe, and it's a really collaborative effort between our staff, our school board, our principals. I see Matt on Zoom. Welcome, virtual folks. Good to have you with us. And actually our students, but we don't rest on our laurels in keeping schools safe. It doesn't just happen. And I want to go into actually quite a few bullet points about what it is we do to keep schools safe. And I'm going to move through it pretty quickly because frankly, I'd rather have your questions than I would stand up and talk, but it's important for folks to know just what it is that we do to keep our schools safe. The first thing I have is a crisis response and disaster mitigation plan. Tom, it's on the table. You feel free to pass that around. Would somebody be in charge of making sure I leave with that? At least half the time I take off without it and then I have to chase it down. So feel free to look through that. It's kind of a Bible in kind of how we handle school security things. Some of that I wrote myself. Some of it was copied with permission from the Red Cross. And it's not magic. It just gives our administrators a guide, something to be on their office shelf that they can pull off the shelf. So lots of school security revolves around the Safe Schools Act. School districts never had this until just after Columbine. Hard to say that a catastrophic event like Columbine brought about some positive changes, but it has. And actually, I think as a society, we're learning a lot from each mass school shooting. Wish we would never have another one, but the fact is we're having them all the time. And sadly enough, a lot of times they don't even hit the news. So, but the Safe Schools Act is post-Columbine legislation, and it really brought about three things that had not been in existence before. It says that all schools needed to have a safe schools plan. Seems like a no-brainer, doesn't it? But a lot of school districts didn't. They couldn't delineate to a parent or to an administrator just what it is they did to keep schools safe. The second was that the school district could inquire about criminal records of employees. Believe it or not, that used to be illegal. But the most important thing from a school safety standpoint is that juvenile records can then be shared between law enforcement, prosecutors, and school personnel. That too used to be taboo. We used to have to call your buddy at the police department and get whatever information you need undercover. Now it's mandated that be shared. The weakness of that, and the mental health folks would say it's not a weakness. I say it is that mental health information can't be shared. I understand the confidentiality of that, but every once in a while we'll get a student that writes a journal and we can't get access to it because journals sometimes contain valuable information. But there are ways around that, but those types of things and what's in a person's head says a lot about what we do to keep schools safe. So with that act in mind, I want to just detail a few things that we do either on an ongoing basis or annually. I do a school vulnerability and risk assessment as part of the Safe Schools Act. It's a 90-some point checklist that myself or my assistant, who I'll get to here in just a little while, does at each school within the first 45 days of school. It's something as simple as identifying vulnerabilities and, if correctable, correcting them. We have school lockdown drills. I'm sure that doesn't surprise anybody. And each particular school has a lockdown plan. If I were to ask you how many lockdown drills a school has to have in a school year, what would your answer be? All good answers, but the answer is 0. There is not a mandate anywhere for schools to do lockdown drills. Not going to happen on my watch, not going to happen on Dr. Pilch's watch. But a lot of schools don't do lockdown drills, primarily the smaller districts. There is some concern that the drill itself freaks out the younger kids or their parents when we send a correspondence home that we did a lockdown drill at your school today. But lockdown drill practices are indicative of what your performance is going to be in an actual emergency. And that's why we do them, and we do them every year. And our staff, in most cases, readily agrees to do those, and those are important. And if, you know what, if we don't get it right, it's a drill. We do it again. So I think our district does a nice job with that. We're using a new concept called standard response protocol to lock down our schools. There's 5 parameters: hold, secure, lockdown, evacuation, and shelter. That came out of the I Love You Guys Foundation, which was authored by a guy named John Michael Keyes, who you may or may not have heard of before. His daughter was killed a number of years ago in the Platte Canyon shooting. And she's the one that was in the classroom with the gunman, and she sensed that her time was about up, which it was, and she texted her parents, "I love you guys." So hence the name I Love You Guys Foundation. We have, like I said, an individual plan for a lockdown. I sometimes have people go through the crisis manual that is being passed around, and they'll say, well, there's not a category here for lockdown. There's not, because each school has an individual plan. Now, there are lots of categories there that would necessitate a lockdown, but obviously the plan is going to be drawn up based on the infrastructure of the school. If you take Greeley Central versus the new Greeley West versus Northridge, those schools, the infrastructure would dictate you to really need 3 different plans. So that's why we do that. We have a really vibrant school messenger system that if we lock down a school or a quadrant of schools, we can notify parents via a system that our old system was like the Pony Express. If you put it out, your parents might get it by the end of the day. Now they're going to get it within 3 to 5 minutes, knowing that your child's school has been locked down. It's we could do the whole district, we could do part of the district, we could do one school. We have to use this, fairly often when we do not drills, but when we do a legitimate lockdown. I had asked for been asking for a audio video entry system for a number of years to secure our schools, because the days have been over for quite a while that where you could just walk up to a school, into your child's school, and just have unfettered access. You really spit it, open the door and walk in. But the activities of many in our society dictate that's not possible. So I got that audio video entry system after Sandy Hook. And it's a simple concept. It's a very low maintenance. It was a one-time expenditure where our schools, if the system's working right, you would walk up to any of our schools in the school district, except for Greeley Central. You couldn't just walk in. You have to push the button and ask you for welcome you, hopefully. Ask for the reason for your visit. The whole time your mug is visible on a closed circuit camera inside. And 99.9% of our visitors are completely legitimate. It's that 0.1% that we want to be able to identify. So you may ask, why not Greeley Central? We're working on it, but the infrastructure is tough. The central, they call Greeley Central the castle for a reason, if you can picture it. It was built in 1927. It's still very, very functional, but the multiple access points make it pretty tough for this audio visual system. So you could walk into Central through one of 3 doors if you were to go up there right now, but with inside one of those 3 doors would be one of my security personnel to greet you and assist you. So that's the only school within our district that doesn't have it at this point. Our collaboration with law enforcement is outstanding. Some of it might be because I used to be one of them, but that's certainly not our. Law enforcement realizes their obligation to help us make schools safe. We have five officers with Greeley Police assigned to our schools, 4 officers and a sergeant. That it's not, school security is not their only job, but it's most of their job. We give them an office, we give them a parking space up front, because what would you think I want people to see when they drive by a school? Sadly, I want them to see a police car. So we give them a place to park, we give them office space, we welcome them in our schools. They service our high schools and our middle schools, and they don't, they're not assigned to our elementary schools in particular, but they are present and floating those and You know, if Matt and Evans wants an officer, he simply calls, and there's one Evans officer that reports the schools, and she would go by and assist with that. They all have floor plans. I want them to know our schools. They're on email, so it used to be a big book, but now if the police department, ambulance, fire departments responding to one of our schools on a crisis, they can pull up our plan. That's really important. I encourage them to train at our schools. I want them to have SWAT training. I want them to rappel. I just used one of our schools recently for some canine training, because one, I want to be a good neighbor, and two, I want officers in our schools as much as possible. Obviously, we don't train that type of training during the school day. We do it at night. You see some school crossing guards around. There are 18 of them. That is a 50-50 cost share between the school district and the police department. That works quite well. There are 24 campus security officers that are under my umbrella, but they're site-based. I hire them. Some of them I don't see that often. They work for the principal. They are civilians, unarmed. Some of them wear I'm happy to buy them security polos. Some of them wear them, some of them don't. That's fine. But their sole job is security. We don't theoretically want them doing anything that's not security related. We want them to be the first line of defense. You ever hear of a threat assessment? You know, when Junior makes, you know, it's like being in a movie theater yelling out fire, or in the line at TSA, mention the word bomb. We have kids frequently who say abrupt things in our schools that would relate to either personal or school violence. The way we choose to deal with those is to do a threat assessment to dig down to try to determine, did he or she make a flippant statement, or are they a risk? And most of them are not significant risks, but without the process, we don't know that for sure. So we do about 250 threat assessments a year. It sounds high, but remember, in the scheme of things, that we have 31 schools and about 23,000 students. So I'm not trying to minimize it, but we do a lot of them. Fire drills. So I asked the question about how many lockdown drills are mandated, and we got through that. How many fire drills are mandated? Okay, there's 10 fire drills mandated by the Uniform Fire Code, completely inflexible. Once or twice in my career, we haven't got them all in, and the fire marshal is not happy about that. And that information gets to the superintendent, and guess who it gets to next? So we don't miss our fire drills. The point I want to make is that, is there something wrong when we need 10 fire drills and no lockdown drills? I'm not minimizing fire drills. They're very important. We have them down to a science. Most districts do. But one more question for the audience. When's the last time a student died in a fire in the United States at a school? 1958, 64 years ago. So again, not to minimize, we need to get out of our schools and quickly. The first thing I look at when I see the fire drill report is not that they did the drill, it's how long did it take you to get out of your building. So they're important, but it never ceases to amaze me that there's not a mandate for lockdown drills. I'm also not saying we need more government in our schools, because we don't. But it seems a little skewed to me that we need 10 fire drills and no lockdown drills. So chance of me changing that is slim. So I'll just deal with it and we'll react accordingly. So we have a non-negotiable student dress code that is just what it says. It's non-negotiable. The schools can have a tougher dress code, but these are the things that we ask them to not deviate from so that we can have some consistency. What would you guess is the reason that 6 or 7 years ago we had to have this non-negotiable student dress code? Any ideas? It's gangs. Walks like a duck, talks like a duck. There are 13 points on this non-negotiable dress code. Here are the key bullets. No shaved or notched eyebrows. Why do you suppose that is? So the kids, so our gang activity has come way down, but it's coming back up. It is. So it's important for us to keep our thumb on it. But some kids that are in gangs notch their eyebrows. They either shave them, and we say absent a medical condition, because there's alopecia, there's probably some other things that are legitimate medical reasons for why people don't have eyebrows. When our kid that walks like a duck and talks like a duck has no eyebrows, we're going to assume that he or she is involved in gang activity with a few other parameters. So I don't see it so much anymore. About 5 or 6 years ago, it was really big, and that's why we put it in. We notch our eyebrows, usually with anybody know the numbers of the gangs that are really gangs associated with? Have been for years and years and years. It's 13 and it's 14. The 13 is a Sereno, the 14 is a Notemo. The 13 is blue, the 14 is red. So once in a while, we'll get an administrator come in from another district. We had one recently from Phoenix, and he said, you know, you're all lucky because we have like 7 or 8 different groups. The benefit to us, if there is a benefit to gang affiliation, is that our kids have always been 13, 14, red or blue. So they'll notch the 13, 1, 3, 1, 4. Sometimes they'll reverse it 1, 3, 1, 4 in their eyebrows. That's a no-no. We have them color them in. I stress to our administrators, don't do what one administrator did a few years ago and take the Sharpie out and do it yourself. Because I had to tap dance that. That was not a good plan. But for the 95% of kids that are on our schools to learn, gang activity is pretty intimidating. That's why a lot of them do it. So no red or blue, unnatural hair color or belts. So kids will, you know, they will color their hair. Not that coloring your hair is wrong, but in this fashion it is. They will wear belts. They will wear these cloth belts. You will see the 130-pound kid that's wearing a belt that would fit me. It dangles below his or her knees. If it's red or blue and it's dangling between his or her knees, again, if it walks like a duck. No solid red or blue shirts other than designated school uniforms. When many of our schools, elementary, some of the K-8s are uniform schools. I support that. Most parents do, some don't. Most of the uniforms get donated for our parents that are high in poverty and can't afford the uniforms. Completely understand that, but we tell them, please don't go to red or blue uniforms. And they don't. So that's been helpful. No red or blue bandanas or any color bandana that's draped on the clothing or hanging out of a pocket. Again, what I train our security and our administrators, if you see a kid with a bandana hanging over his shoulder, it's about to go down. So we have got a lot of mileage with this non-negotiable dress code. Our administrators, by and large, have done a really good job. If you're gonna, you know, we're not necessarily taxed with keeping kids out of gangs, but we can make them check it at the door, and that's what we're trying to do there. Very few problems, although I've started to see a little bit of an uptick. That's the crux in general of the non-negotiable dress code. I mean, there's the standard. If it's indecent, don't wear it. Some of the schools have measurements for the young ladies with their skirts, and that's not part of the non-negotiable. It can be part of what the schools do. Safe to tell. Anybody here safe to tell? Safe to tell's completely out of control. Some of it's good, some of it's not. Safe to tell is an anonymous tip line that came about probably been, I'm guessing, 10, 12 years ago, which gave anybody an anonymous way to call this phone line. It rings into Camp George West State Patrol in Golden and report things that either happened or might be happening at school. We get a lot of suicidal ideologies. That is not out of control. Those are things that we want to investigate. We get a lot of, not a lot, we get a few, I heard Junior saying he was going to shoot up the school or shoot so-and-so. Obviously, we want those. We investigate and they come to me, the school principal and law enforcement. And here's why they're out of control. I had one last night. I'm making up this. Joe Smith is driving without a license. Okay. Or Mary looked at me wrong. So of the 540 that we got last year, if 100 of them were legitimate and we can save one life, I'm all for safe to tell. The other thing we get is a lot of false reports. They're anonymous, right? So by and large, I like safe to tell. Sometimes you get them and you roll your eyes, but then I've got a fairly new assistant that he would say, this is just a waste of my time. And I said, okay, it is most of the time. But for that instance where somebody has suicidal or homicidal ideologies, or what if they're a bully? Does bullying happen in our schools? Damn right it does. So there's lots of positives. There's some abuse of the system. I think you could say that about virtually everything. So video cameras, you know what? We have those now. Thanks to all of you who live in Greeley Evans who supported the bond and the mill levy overrides. Nobody likes taxes. I don't like them either. But if you drive around our community, you will see what these things have done for our school district. We've got a new Greeley West, so that when it rains or snow on the roof, I would walk through the old Greeley West without even looking. We'd have 25 buckets catching rain. We don't have that anymore. We have a brand new Taunton K through 8 out here on 71st Avenue. We have a huge addition of McAuliffe down on 4th Street. We have a huge addition to Chapel out on 34th Street. And we've got the new Madison's going up right now. It's just like Greeley West. They built it, tore the old school down. When Madison's complete, it'll be open for business in August. Then they'll take the wrecking ball to Madison. Hopefully they won't find what they found at West. At the very last minute, they found a bunch of asbestos they weren't aware of. And it not only delayed the process, but any idea what it costs to remove asbestos out of the school auditorium? It's $1 million. So those are things you deal with as they come along, but kudos to those who supported these measures. We now have video cameras in the high schools, the K-8s, the middle schools, and we're working on the elementary schools. I used to go to meetings in I'm hitting a hard stop, somebody throw something at me. If I would go to meetings of my colleagues and they'd be talking about the video cameras, I would sort of want to slink under the seat because we're in Greeley, the 12th largest school district in the state, and we don't have any of that stuff. So I wasn't all that much of an advocate for cameras because I thought they were a bit post-mortem. Boy, was I wrong. They are a bit post-mortem because a lot of times we have to go in after the fact and look at the cameras. But would it shock you if I said that our school discipline in the schools that have cameras has gone way down? I heard a kid at Greeley West the other day say, God, this is ridiculous. You must have 500 cameras in there. And of course we don't, but I said, yeah, you're right, we do. And we actually have around 200, but it's a really large school. So really large plus is a huge benefit to school security. We have contracted with a company called Raptor. It's a visitor management system. We vet every volunteer that comes into our schools. What would you suggest I want to know for visitors to come in our school? What are a couple things I'd be concerned about? Yeah, it's not that, you wrote a bad check 10 years ago. We don't care. You arrest for shoplifting. we don't care. Here's what I do care about. Child abusers and sex offenders. Do not want them in our schools. We vet thousands, and we might have 20 a year that are kicked out. That's a bonus to me. Maybe those 20 are completely legit. Usually they're parents. I understand that. But if you have those types of things in your background, you're not coming in our schools. Maybe if you come in for parent-teacher conference, which we have to allow, you're going to be supervised. So that's why it's there. I can look anybody straight in the eye and say, we're vetting folks to our schools. It's a drill manager system. We don't fill out paperwork for fire drill anymore. It's all done on an app, and it's a reunification system. You know, much like the lockdown drill, when we have to evacuate kids, we have to have a place to reunify them, right? So it's a system that's all done by phone. So we've only used it in drills. I hope I can get through my tenure without having to use it legitimately, but if we need to, I feel like we're prepared. That's all that I had. I would gladly take your questions. And if you have questions that I can answer with regard to mayor stuff, happy to answer them too. And I don't know how much time I have, so I'm letting somebody else be in charge of that. Oh no, Tom. I always hate to see Tom's hand up.
Well,
Speak to me.
Mine is more of a kudos to the school district. A lot of things that John said, the reason I've run campaigns to where the mill levy, right? And some of the stuff that I thought was critically necessary. I know John was a long time ago when I first decided that that's something that we wanted to look into, and it's been big years in the making. So getting those things all lined up is really important for our school district. Important. It gives them a credit for pushing the buttons in the right places, in the right places to make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Any questions?
Sure will.
Tying two things together, talk about the SROs, school resource officers, sure the police that are there. And then you talked about gang update. One of the things that I found was that one of the important roles of those SROs was to get into those groups and create trust within the areas where gang activity could take, and kind of steer kids in the right direction and also build confidence with the other kids to report activity. Are your officers trained to do that?
They are. Good question, Louis. The question, Christian and Marlon, was related to school resource officers in our schools. I have been in the past involved with Greeley Police in selecting those people, because I can tell you, after spending 25 years in the field, a lot of cops are not particularly good with kids. A lot of them just would not be suited. They may be great in some other areas, but you got to have a high degree of patience. It is about trust. We like the school resource officers to be there for positive reasons. The SROs that are effective are the ones going through halls, high-fiving kids, and there's mutual respect. If you see law enforcement officers around schools running radar, chances are it's not the SRO, because nothing leaves a worse taste in a student's mouth than getting a ticket. So it's all geared to be really positive, proactive. We've had some officers come through that wanted to be SROs that will look at each other and say, no way this person's being, they're way too abrasive to be an SRO. So yeah, kudos to both Greeley and Evans Police. They do a good job selecting them, and it's people that have a lot of patience and are willing to work with the students, because they can try you. Can.
John, I just want to piggyback off of Jordan said. Just thank you for all the things that you do. You know, I have 2 kids in District 6. I went to District 6, my wife teaches as well. So from like a parental standpoint, hearing all of these things and knowing what you're doing is a huge deal. But also from a community member standpoint,
A year ago or so, I came across a security issue in my day-to-day life. I had to do something to school, and I was able to call you on your cell phone. I just appreciate that. I know that's not true with everywhere. And so just thank you so much.
Thank you, appreciate it. Let me just add, when I talked about, I have an exit strategy I do. About 3 years ago, I had always, I told every superintendent I worked for, no, I'm good, I don't need any help. And at one point, Dr. Pilch got persistent and said, this is way too much. You can either decide to hire an assistant or I'll hire one for you. So I hired one. I wanted a cop, frankly, I did. And so I hired a Greeley cop. He ended up not working out. So this past May, we parted ways. And my first thought selfishly was, oh, great, this is going to delay my retirement a year or two. But it didn't, because I went out and stole, and I would say that if Chief Turk were here, I stole one of his finest officers. I stole Sergeant Wade Corliss, who's been with the department 15 years, who was an SRO. He supervised the SRO program, and he ran the Greeley Police SWAT team. Is that somebody you want in charge of school security? So I could leave tomorrow and our schools would be in good shape. And that's important to me, because when the first one I hired ended up not working out, before he didn't work out, both Dr. Pilch and I had my doubts about whether he was the guy or the gal. So I would pass the torch to Wade with the utmost confidence that things are going to go really smooth in our schools.
Well, John, this is a silly question. You are our fearless leader, and you're the head of the school, whatever it was you are. Why can't you mandate a lockdown drill to go along with the fire drill?
Well, I do within our district. I think there should be a systemic change, Colette. I'm usually, when I read about plans that legislators have for more unfunded mandates, it frustrates me. But lockdown drills really wouldn't be unfunded mandates. But I question our priorities in school security for the Uniform Fire Code to mandate 10 fire drills. I really can't think of a school right now that doesn't do lockdown drills. I know some of the smaller districts don't, but we're doing drills on my watch. Because if we don't drill and we have an actual emergency and we don't get it right, the buck stops right here. So it's mandated in our district, and Dr. Pilch would see that. She stays completely out of my way, but if we didn't do lockdown drills, I'd be in her office explaining why, and I don't want to do that because I'm scared to death of her. No, she's the bomb, and there's some folks in our community that are trying to run her off, and it'd be the worst thing that could happen. That's my editorial comment. It'd be the worst thing that could happen to our school district. Our superintendent, Mark.
John, when you look at people who do these kinds of things, I mean, shooters and whatnot, is that an impulsive thing or is this something built up that they planned over time? And, you know, looking at having grandchildren, I just went to my grandkids' school and had lunch there and then I went through and but, you know, I'm impressed with the security. And that, I think, two questions I'd have for a school going in is, okay, I want to see the curriculum. I want to know about school security.
Good question. Both of them are good questions. And you know, I've spent a lot of time studying school shooters. I take the time to read the after action report on every school shooting, and there's usually a theme. They're usually not impulsive. There's usually signs. Sometimes there's lots of signs, and we miss them. Parents miss them. Schools miss them. That's like I told a guy on the phone, he was upset about some things going on at his kid's school. And he said, unless you can guarantee my child's safety, he's not coming back. And I said, I'm not going to lie to you. I can't guarantee your child's safety, but I can tell you what I've done and our district has done to harden the target. And that's what you can do, but it's, so no, they're planned. There's no question that there are steps. I can't think of one as it's going through my mind, Mark, where there's been any indication that a school shooting has been impulsive and there've been no, as you look back after the fact that there's been no indicators. I just can't. I don't think there have been any.
Something came to mind with that is, what are policies, around districts and states and things like that that exist right now as to whether instructors, other staff members are allowed to carry, concealed carry or open carry?
God, I thought I was going to make it through without that question.
Everybody,
So it's the question for Christian or Marlon was folks carrying in our schools. I'm a big Second Amendment guy, but I will tell you that without a lot of details, I've been involved in some deadly force incidents in law enforcement. The physiology of that is so much different than if I were out on the pistol range right now, shooting rounds into a target. In general terms, for the standard question, should teachers carry? My answer is no, with the caveat that there are a lot of people in our schools that could carry that would be proficient, that would know when to use it. I also believe there are some that wouldn't know when to use it, that would completely freak out and or they would get their weapon taken away. So it's a tough question. I mean, I'm not going to dodge it and say, yes, absolutely, they should carry, because in general terms, I don't believe that. But and my security officers don't carry. Myself and Wade, we are armed at all times in our schools. And we were asked after Uvalde, Texas, to open carry. So I'm not, I mean, I'd send my car, I'm not carrying in here. But if I were at a school right now, I would be open carry. And got 25 years, Wade's got 15. I'm pretty sure we know what we're doing. And what are the chances of me or Wade or one of those SROs being at a school when an active school violence breaks out is pretty minimal. But when Dr. Pilch went around, she goes to every single school the first 30 days or so, talks to all the staff. She said, Mr. Gates and Mr. Corliss are going to be carrying. They're going to be open carrying in the schools. About 90% of the folks in the room were fine with it. About 10% were not. So I'm sorry for the 10% that are. I respect their opinion, but I think folks understand that we're doing that for the right reasons. I will tell you that if Chief Jerk were up here answering that question, he would probably say he wouldn't want teachers carrying, because if cops go into school on a crisis, guess what? They're going to want to know friend versus foe. And what if 3 teachers have their guns out that look like perpetrators? That's a bit far-fetched. I get it, but
yeah, I should have clarified, I don't mean specifically our district, but just maybe nationally what the trends are leaning towards that, because it does come up. It seems like it's pretty topical.
it does come up. I look at response times too, even for our 3 remote schools out here, Toynton, Winogrand, and Northridge. You're gonna, if a cop isn't already there, you're gonna have law enforcement there in 3 to 4 minutes. Most of our schools, it's 1.5 to 2 minutes. If I were Grover High School, whatever they call it, it's not Grover High School, I would have staff, I would send them to training and have them armed. There is a private school here in Greeley that has 4 armed teachers. I think they absolutely did it the right way. They sent them to a 40+ hour class. And if I were a parent at this unnamed private school, I would have confidence knowing that those that are armed know what they're doing.
Last question, and then we'll wrap it up.
There's been so much in the news about the 6-year-old that shot his teacher. You have any thoughts about that? Because people are saying, oh, that there were warnings and they should have known. And
So, yeah, I learned it a long time ago to never say you've seen it all. Because if you'd have told me a 6th grader was going to shoot his teacher, I would say no.
6 years.
6-year-old, I would say no. Now, from what I read, there were indicators, there was intelligence. I know the superintendent's already been fired I'm guessing, I don't know if they had a person in my capacity and had knowledge, but if in fact there was intelligence, that you can't underestimate it. If somebody says a 6-year-old is carrying a gun in his or her backpack, we check them routinely. We have a lot more authority to search than law enforcement does, but it's all in the interest of school safety. We check backpacks, coats. We don't frisk. We have people dump their pockets almost every day. 99% of the time, everything's fine. But how about that 1% you miss it? That was horrendous. Teachers fine, I guess, but beside the point,
She's suing.
I would too if I were.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, everybody.
Next time you can come back as the mayor and talk mayor stuff too.
I can add one more then.
Oh, you can, yeah. Oh, okay. Well, then we'll have to get him on the agenda, Mark, so he can be heckled more. All right, as a thank you for your program today, this little comfort animal is gonna be going to Will County Sheriff's Department for a child in distress, and the tag on it says, "This stuffed animal wants to help you when things are hard. Snuggle with it and you will feel a little love and caring. This comfort animal is given to you by Greeley Centennial Rotary in honor of John Gate, who is our presenter with today's date. And on the back is our 4-way test. So thank you very much for that.